Culturally, there needs to be a massive shift. And I'm not sure if a lot of organizations are ready for that, because we can't do things for status quo, because the threat landscape has changed so much in the last 2 years. Do you have the right security culture? Do you have the right systems in place to be able to withstand that? And I think that's the biggest threat. Most corporate security policies are designed in isolation from reality. So there is this assumed unlimited time or perfect attention and zero pressure, but that's not the case. That's not how humans operate.
83% of IT and engineering professionals readily admit to actively bypassing security controls just to get their jobs done.
Smart people don't wake up wanting to break the rules or not to abide by security. I think people bypass controls because the systems put them in position where security conflicts with actually getting their job done.
Are we just performing compliance here to here?
I think the biggest delusion with leadership is that believing that culture is built through enforcement, and it's not. We haven't built a cybersecurity industry on control. I think we've built it on perceived control.
When employees delegate these critical workflows to these AI agents, who owns the culture of accountability if the agent's compromised, especially if we're in a phase at the moment that they're still not treating their human workforce as equals?
That's such a tricky question. Do I think that organizations are culturally ready to manage digital co-workers? No. I think there's a black box with the conversation around agentic AI at the moment for everyone at all sides of the tables to make good decisions. So does it make me a bit worried? Yes. There's going to be a lot of mistakes being made. If you have everyone who looks the same and act the same, there's going to be a blind spot because you don't have diversity of thought. I would say cybersecurity is one of those industries that you'll be burnt out because you might be called at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. because someone made a very silly decision and you're thinking, how did this happen to cause a data breach? And you have to keep pushing. So definitely get the network. And there are so many organizations. If Sadia is not for you, there is YSIS. There's also CyBlack. There are, if you are in the US, there are many ones. There are Blacks in cybersecurity. There are so many organizations out there. There's Latinos in cybersecurity. If you go to the ISC 50x50, they literally have a list of different women groups wherever you are in the world.
Why do you think it's critical for these individuals to get out of the boardroom and get into the trenches, and have these conversations?
Because you need community. I think it goes back to the point that I mentioned. I know for a fact that a lot of CISOs are lonely, and I know that there also is a lot of moving parts. And sometimes it can kind of feel, especially when you are a leader, there's a lot of pressure on you.
You've broken down how sort of broken corporate systems are forcing good people to fail, and that systematic failure in terms of how we're managing our careers and hiring our teams. So look, stop fighting a broken system, everybody.
Our mission is to make cybersecurity accessible to everyone. So make sure you stick around to the absolute end of this episode for an exclusive announcement to help with your growth.
For years, the cybersecurity industry has tried to buy its way out of trouble. We buy more tools, we write stricter policies, and we force employees through mind-numbing compliance training. Yet breaches keep happening. Why? Because we're treating human behaviour like a software bug.
And welcome back to the special Cyber Leaders Summit edition of Secure Cyber Connect podcast. Today we're turning out the vendor pitches, ignoring them completely, and tackling one vulnerability that can't be patched: broken security culture.
Our guest on this episode is Stephanie Itimi, an award-winning cybersecurity and digital transformation executive, currently Director of Information Protection and Compliance, Age UK. She's led enterprise security, governance and resilience across government and national organisations, and is recognised by the World Economic Forum, the NCSC and NHS for her leadership skills. Steph is also the author of Cybersecurity Culture, a forthcoming book exploring how organisations can move from compliance to real behavioural resilience. But her impact goes far beyond the boardroom. Stephanie is founder of CIDIA, CIC, an award-winning organisation focused on diversifying the cybersecurity and AI workforce. They've grown a community of over 8,000 women from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds and delivered programs that have trained and supported thousands of individuals into cybersecurity and emerging technology roles, working in partnership with organisations such as Google, Sage, Meta and Plexel to build inclusive and future-ready talent pipelines. Stephanie, welcome to the show. Let's challenge the status quo.
Thank you so much for having me on the platform. That was quite a mouthful.
Absolutely. Yeah, we always work our way through it. We've had bigger intros, so it's absolutely. Yeah. So, look, just kick things off with what is a commercial truth that makes every executive deeply uncomfortable. We spend billions and billions on cybersecurity, yet research shows that 83% of IT and engineering professionals readily admit to actively bypassing security controls just to get their jobs done. Knowing this, have we built a £300 billion industry based on the illusion of control?
I think the short answer is yes, but I will explain a little bit further. So the statistic doesn't surprise me at all. We haven't built a cybersecurity industry on control. I think we've built it on perceived control. And there's a difference between those two. So I would say that what organizations are really doing is layering tools on top broken systems and expecting behaviors to just magically improve. But behavior is not a bug, it's not a technical instrument when you're dealing with people. And most of the time is a response to environment. So if 83%, I think is the number of professionals are bypassing controls, that's a people problem. As well as a design failure, in my opinion. And I think the biggest illusion with leadership is that believing that culture is built through enforcement, and it's not. Culture is built through systems that reward. So, for example, let's say you're working in an organization that rewards speed and KPIs and innovation, and not necessarily security. Well, those two are going to at some point have a tension point. I think there's a graph that says that the more innovation, the lower the security. So if we're not rewarding people for actually upholding security or seeing security as part of their day job, and rather we're focusing on enforcement and punishment, then you're not really changing people's behavior. You need to make it a status quo. You need to embed it within the conversations of innovation. One of my favorite words is always saying that security is an enabler. And I know most organizations, and I guess most CISOs, tend to struggle with articulating that to the board because security is kind of seen as this compliance or police function when it's not. So I think the real question isn't why are people breaking the rules? I think the question is, why do our systems make breaking the rules the easiest path to success? And are we embedding success when we are talking about security and how it's an enabler for all the things we want with the KPIs, the speed and the innovation?
That's some brilliant points. And to our audience, perhaps share your thoughts in the comments section. And Steph, if we can build on that, when an insider-driven incident costs over £10 million on average, the immediate boardroom reaction is actually to blame someone, label them as a stupid user, or perhaps even fire a CISO. So what's the biggest illusion that leadership has about building a strong security culture, one that lasts?
I think it's understanding that smart people don't wake up wanting to break the rules or not to abide by security. I think people bypass controls because the systems put them in position where security conflicts with actually getting their job done. And I think at a board level, with your example that you gave, is I don't think boards truly understand what security is. I think there's a knowledge gap, but also I think the importance of security, especially now with a lot of people rushing with AI, rushing to kind of how do we use technology to increase efficiencies, to cut down costs. Security tends to be an afterthought rather than actually security by design when you are talking about technology. And if you ask me, I would say that most corporate security policies are designed in isolation from reality. So there is this assumed unlimited time or perfect attention and zero pressure, but that's not the case. That's not how humans operate. So I think when we're thinking about board is understanding how do we show the board that actually security is an enabler, and how do we help them understand that actually by you sacking a CISO is not going to magically change the problem or make it better, but actually understanding what were the issues that led for that particular incident to take place. What were the lessons learned? Was there a thorough investigation to highlight that the CISO was actually in the wrong, or that security controls weren't upheld? I think it's understanding the system and why that system didn't work in that particular time. And also is to understand that you can never have 100% security. It's just, not possible. And if you do have the mindset that, you're not going to have 100% security and there's always human error, how do you design your system to allow for that mindset in mind? So that's what I'll probably say to your question.
No, I appreciate you sharing the perspective there. And tell us a bit more about the book that you've wrote, cybersecurity culture. Tell us about the human side and the realities there. Ultimately, a lot of people in the industry, they are good, they are smart, but as you mentioned earlier, they're knowingly bypassing these controls. So are corporations and organizations putting security policies in place that are fighting human nature?
So I think what I would say is like the main concept of the book is to understand that when you're building a culture, it's almost like an onion that you're peeling the layers, in the sense that it's not just creating a policy and you think that's going to fix your security culture. It's not. It's actually going beyond that. When we talk about training, are you overtraining your staff? Some people, they have 30 minutes videos and they click, next, but it doesn't mean they're actually retaining that knowledge. I think there's so many great organizations or companies that I've seen that focus on micro learning. How do you embed it into people's everyday work where they have that tactical knowledge, but you're actually utilizing security knowledge on top of that tactical knowledge to ensure that they uphold security controls that you have within your organization? It's also understanding that culture comes from the top. If the board doesn't uphold security, if the CEO doesn't see security as a driver or something of importance, then it's going to trickle down. You're going to see it in the culture of the organization. So it's actually saying, how do we get the board and people within executive positions to also see security as the main things? And as a CISO, most times you're having to speak with other executives. I want to talk about different departments that I know tend to be outliers in security conversation, but it's about highlighting why security and compliance is an enabler. If you're secure, it's not necessarily an income generator, which sometimes is a struggle where you're trying to get budget from the board, but actually it is a income saver, because if there is a breach and there's a fine in the future, that's going to cost you millions of pounds that you just don't have. So it's understanding that actually by me creating a culture that allows people to understand that if they do see something that's wrong, they come to the organization quickly and they're not scared to. And when they do something wrong, they know that there's a process in place in which they can follow those processes to ensure that it's appropriately handled at the right time. But again, it's that kind of culture thing. And one of my favorite things is, when we think about things like health and safety and fire drills, you go through fire drills, especially when we think about secondary school. We go through the fire drills where there's an alarm that rings. We know the spots to kind of queue in. We know the fire exits. We know things like that. You need to be able to build that culture within your workplace where you are creating incidents, simulations where people know, okay, during a breach, during an incident of some sort, I know what to do. I know who to call. I know the processes. And by actually taking people through those steps, you're reducing the anxiety that they have, and they are able to come forward. Because one of the biggest things in especially for security teams, is shadow. People using shadow AI, people using tools they're not supposed to do, people doing things and not letting the organization know that this is what we've done. And what we always say, or even me in my workplace, is that, listen, we all make mistakes. What's important is, how do we fix that mistake? And I think that's where the culture comes in actually creating that openness. And that's what I hope the book brings, is actually taking people step by step with what that looks like. And I tend to also, if you're an abstract thinker, I tend to use analogies and kind of storytelling embedded to that to show examples of how you can do it. So if you're a small business, or if you have a medium to larger size organization, the book will be helpful for you.
No, that's brilliant. Really looking forward to the release of that.
Yeah, and just, you've touched on this to some degree already. We're always telling employees to do better, be vigilant. You yourself have argued that we need to design these systems, where this behaviour this security mindset is the default position. What does a company actually look like when their security is the path of least resistance rather than this impasse?
I think what you have is you have an increase in reporting culture where people actually report things quickly for you to be able to stop it. And I think you have not only individuals who are champions, because we tend to use things like a GDPR champion or cybersecurity champion, but you actually have people who are taking ownership. It actually reduces your workload and kind of being the evangelist of the security culture because you have people who are taking ownership for it. And yeah, different organizations who do it. When I was doing the book, I interviewed some execs, and actually some execs, what they do is they gamify the process where they kind of put full departments to see how well you're doing. And it gets that kind of competitive spirit. But also in any workplace, when you take a role, you kind of know the progression. So let's say you're a SOC analyst, you know the next steps from that. Similar, if you are doing security champions within your organization, do you have a role structure where it actually allows the people to know that if I do more, this is what I'm going to get? But I do want to highlight that just because you have a good security culture doesn't mean that the breaches are going to go down. That's not the case. But what it means is that you're going to have a higher reporting culture and a higher oversight of where your weaknesses are and vulnerabilities. And because you have a larger oversight over that, you're able to resolve it quickly. So that's what, in a utopia world, a good security culture would look like for an organization.
Good advice. And look, talking a little bit about, Sadia, you founded Sadia, you've successfully built a community of over 8,000 women from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. What was the exact moment that you looked around this industry, realised that, the door was typically shut to many people, and then actually decided to do something about it and pave the way, kick the door open yourself, if you will?
I would say it was when I was working in the Home Office. I was working specifically on modern slavery, human trafficking, and child sexual exploitation. And looking at the dark web and looking at certain things, I realized that there were lots of conversations happening. And the individuals who were being affected, which tend to be women, necessarily you can't have children. I mean, you can have teenagers, but obviously you can't have children on the table. But I realized that actually in some of the cases I was looking at, I don't understand the cultural aspects of a Chinese woman or a Vietnamese woman in the cases I was seeing. And I realized actually there need to be more people on this table who have this oversight. And when I would go to events, I saw that there were very few women who looked like me, and just very few women in general. And I realized that what was the issue? So actually, starting Sadia wasn't meant to be focused on cybersecurity. It was initially meant to be focused on digital skills. So in my church, I had a conversation with someone who told me that they didn't get a managerial position within health and social care because they didn't have Excel skills. And I thought that was very ridiculous because I thought Excel is a skill that anyone can pick up. So I decided in my local library in Slade Green to basically do a free workshop on Excel. And the first session, we had 12 women. Second session, we had 35 women. And in each of the session, all the women were interested in what I was doing. And it was cybersecurity. And Slade Green is like in the outskirts in between Kent and London, depending on where you look at it. And a lot of them couldn't actually go into central London for a lot of the cybersecurity events. They just didn't have time. They had care and responsibilities. Or even the women who did go, there wasn't a comfortability within those events. So I decided I made a decision after kind of 3 months of doing these workshops to focus purely on cybersecurity, because in my day job, I was having gaps with there not being a lot of women on the table. And specifically my team, I was the only woman for a while. And in my department, I was the only Black woman. So it was very much diversity. I couldn't really see where I was. So I decided to merge those two. And I believe it was July 2019 that I decided to focus purely on cybersecurity. And the concept was that how do I get individuals who are already in the industry to come and give a 30-minute talk about how they got into cybersecurity? So I started looking at what are the different careers in cybersecurity. I was looking at the ISACA and ISE squared, kind of different domains. I started looking at the roles that were linked into domains. And I just literally went on LinkedIn and basically messaged anyone that I could find to kind of say, can you give me 30 minutes of your time? Luckily, because I was an alumni at Coventry University, I was able to get a free space. This was pre-COVID, so they had a bit of money then. A free space once a month where they would give us free food. We would have kind of tea and coffee and everything. And I would just invite a speaker, and it was called Learning Tables. And we did that up until COVID. And then when COVID happened, I think then we had about 230 members, and it was purely word of mouth, I would say, from that point. We didn't really do massive kind of marketing. It was more people sharing the experience and inviting their friends and things like that. And then when COVID hit, it was like, oh gosh, I got to rethink this thing. And then I decided actually what I'm going to do is focus on skills, because a lot of the women would come to these talks, but they didn't actually have the skills or the certification to actually get into the industry. So that's when I started having conversations with Moose Cyber Institute, which is a Australian learning company, and we're doing kind of penetration testing boot camps. And then we had our partnership with CompTIA, which just really made it easy for the Security Plus for us to create boot camps purely for the Security Plus, Cloud Essentials, and now AI Essentials. And that was it. And I think what I liked about it is that, sometimes we complain about things, but you can actually be the change. Like, I did not know anyone in the industry. I literally had a dream, a LinkedIn, an annoying persistent to anyone I can find to just say, hey, this is the vision I have. Let me know what you think. And what I will say is, even with doing it, just to encourage anyone who wants to do the same thing, because I think we need more people doing this work, is that we expand your worldview. Your speakers don't have to be from the UK. I think we made Today International by being very open-minded when COVID happened, that anyone from anywhere can participate in webinars and can kind of get the knowledge and experience and also benefits of what we are trying to do. So definitely open your mind and worldview to it, but definitely that's how it started. It started with a silent anger, and I guess I was focused on something else, and it kind of merged into one. And this year, I believe, will be our 7th year in the 29th of October, officially registered on Companies House.
Well, congratulations on that, and we applaud you on your efforts on what is a vitally important topic. So yeah, amazing job. Thank you for sharing.
No, massively. And look, there's a strong audience of female professionals listening right now who want to pivot into cybersecurity, or even obviously into a leadership role. But as I'm sure you could attest, it is exhausting. There are gatekeepers out there, and there's of course that bro culture within tech and wider security. So what advice would you give to them that are looking to bypass that noise, showcase their own value and scale their career? Is social media, for instance, and being involved in communities, is that a great first step, or is there something else that you owe your success to?
I would say it's a mixture of things. I think it's very beneficial for everyone to have a strong personal brand. And what does personal brand means? It means that, what do people know you for when you walk out of the room? And I always say to our members that closed mouths don't get fed. You have to network, you have to be visible, you have to put your work out there. If you're passionate about fashion and tech and cybersecurity, definitely do a blog post. If you're not a speaker, or if you don't want to show your face, write newsletters. LinkedIn allows you to create newsletters at the moment. If you're someone who likes to talk but may not necessarily be interested in visuals, you might want to do a podcast where you interview people. Even if you don't have the experience within cybersecurity that you want, interview the people who have the experience. And that's almost you gathering knowledge, but also sharing that knowledge to everyone else. And then if you're a visuals person, definitely put your face out there, create YouTube channel. Because when I speak to a lot of companies, especially SMEs, because we've done some work with Plexel with their cyber runway, is that a lot of employers are looking for someone who has the passion for cybersecurity. And how do you show that passion? It's by showing up every day and talking about the same thing. Also keeping your commercial awareness, what's going on within the industry that might be applicable in your workplace. If you're not currently within a cybersecurity team, does your organization have a cybersecurity team? Can you network with them? Can you shadow them? Can you speak to other people to see what certain certifications you need? Because you don't need to have a full stack of certifications. I think what's more important is your experience. And I always say, If you're someone who's religious in any capacity, churches, mosques, they are always looking for cybersecurity because they all have websites. Even if it's just you writing a privacy policy, that's you getting experience. So there are many ways in which you can show your passion, but definitely show up and create your portfolio. Your career doesn't have to be linear. I definitely have a portfolio career, and there's always volunteers needed on charity jobs if you go and look. And most of them now are technology related, so you can also use that to your opportunity. And if there isn't any promotion in where you're working, I know the job market right now is a bit stale, but you can always move to a different place. But you have to understand, where am I going? Where am I currently? What is my skills gap? What is my knowledge gap? What is my network gap? And then you work at it on that every day. And that's how you make that jump into leadership. And yes, there are glass ceilings. I'm not going to say that it's all roses and sunshine. And when you do get that leadership position, it can be extremely lonely, especially as a CISO, which is why you need a network. For every staging you need, if you're a mid-level, if you're a CEO, if you're a CISO, at every stage, you need a network of people who are in the same thing. And the great thing about cybersecurity is there's always dinners somewhere. There's always a conference somewhere, and you would always get invited to something on LinkedIn. And you can use the opportunity to network, because the more people you know, the more ways you can kind of see people's perspectives. How do they do something? And then you bring it to your work. But if you don't go out there, if you don't show, how would people know your value? And in life, that's it with everything. You have to highlight what you know. So I would say to the woman is that, yes, there is a skewed favor when it comes to percentage of more men than women in cybersecurity in the UK, even by stats. But you have to see it that only have one career, and how do I make myself visible, and how do I turn the tides into my favor? And you have to be resilient, because there are going to be many times. And this, I will say, cybersecurity is one of those industries that you'll be burnt out, because you might be called at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., because someone made a very silly decision. And you're thinking, how did this happen to cause a data breach? And you have to keep pushing. So definitely get the network. And there are so many organizations. If Sadia is not for you, there is YSIS. There's also CyBlack. If you are in the US, there are many ones. There are Blacks in Cybersecurity. There are so many organizations out there. There's Latinos in cybersecurity. If you go to the ISC 50 times 50, they literally have a list of different women groups wherever you are in the world. So you can definitely find your community. But I think that the only way you can grow your career in cybersecurity is by having community.
So look, people often box diversity into a representation or a corporate social responsibility issue. And that's something we couldn't agree with more on the podcast. The whole essence of this podcast was set up to deal with the D&I space. We're very proud of the fact that 50% of our guests have been female and 30% have come from underrepresented groups. We were sick of people just talking about this at events in a tokenistic fashion and not implementing it into the workplace. You yourself argue it's a hard tactical security imperative to have a diverse workforce. So give us some real world examples of how a room full of people with the exact same background and life experiences can create a worryingly and exploitable blind spot for many companies' defense.
Thank you. I think the way to answer that question is that we live in a global world. So because we're living in a global world, the threat actors are not coming from the UK, they're coming from all over the world. So you need different people from different backgrounds to be able to understand the different contexts of things that happen. If you have everyone who looks the same and act the same, there's going to be a blind spot because you don't have diversity of thought. I know an example of someone where they worked, they were able to kind of decode, I think it was Urdu, because they understood the language. So they were able to understand what the attacker was doing because they had that language information and was able to rectify kind of the incident that was going on in that particular time. And that's an example of someone coming from a different culture that's able to bring their experiences and their culture experience to it, because you're having threat actors from all over the world. And how they operate is going to have cultural significance or cultural nuances that if everyone in the room looks the same, you're just not going to be able to understand those nuances to be able to rectify them. The second thing I will say is it's more beneficial. I think I can't remember the company. I'll find the report to send it to you guys. But the report talked about that companies that had more diverse staff actually earned more because there was diversity of thinking, there was innovation, because you have that tension. And when you have that tension of ideas, that's where you're able to kind of bring innovation. And I think that that's what's missing if you don't have a company with diverse staff. But beyond that, again, we live in a global world. And if you want to be able to make your company secure, then it's very imperative that you have a diverse staff. And I think just to add to that, when you're talking about how do you go beyond this tokenistic perception of seeing diversity, of that diversity doesn't have to do with gender and race only, although I noticed a lot of companies start with gender and then slowly move down when you're thinking about diversity. Diversity has to do with people have different social economic factors of where they grew up. People have different, some people are neurodiverse, some people are neurotypical. There are different ways in which diversity can occur. And having those nuances of difference of thinking allows your company to be much richer when you're approaching or tackling incidents and data breaches that you just don't know where your attacker came from, what type of attacker they are, the threat you're facing. So you do need that diverse staff to be able to do that. And like I said, diversity is not just a tick box exercise, it's a cultural thing. When you are able to have different ideas and also able to give opportunity to anyone, regardless of where they come from, because you're just focusing on can they do the job and can they do the job well, specifically on their merit, which is why even with Sadia, what we do is we focus on skills, because it's not just, giving the women opportunity, but we're training high qualified women into the industry so that they have the right skills and they have the right experience through the projects they do for companies like Sage or KPMG to be able to back up the experience and to be able to actually go for roles within the marketplace.
That's brilliant. And very briefly, and I'll be keen to get your opinion on this as well, Jay, but very briefly, are there 3 tips that you could provide organisations to attract and retain your diverse workforce, for instance?
For sure. I think the first one is, number one is to understand the numbers that you have. And numbers could be, how many women. You can look at all the protected characteristics to just see what your numbers look like, to see where you're starting from. The second thing is to have employee resource groups, so ERGs. So I think that allows, you could have carers. I know some groups have menopause. It allows people with specific interest or specific protected characteristics to be able to have an inner community within the workplace. And the third one is to have goals. What goals do you have? What are your diversity goals? And to understand that your goals, putting them in 3 different buckets. What are your small wins that you can have today? What are your medium size goals that might take you a year, 2 years to implement? And what are your long-term goals, which is where you hope to achieve? So some workplaces might say, our goal by 2030 is to have 50% men and women in our workforce. It can be anything, but once you know where you're starting from, it's then easy for you to see, okay, what do I need to implement? And actually, the good thing about employee resource groups is they become your kind of soundboard, because when you're having certain things like HR practices, HR changes, you're able to utilize your employee resource groups to actually have a sense check as to what we're going to implement. Does it make sense for the organization? Are there any things that we can be doing better, so that they can also give you ideas to better the culture within your organization? So I'll say those are my tips for organizations.
Yeah, and I think you've covered it. I mean, to be fair, I'd just say training managers with unconscious bias, making sure that the outreach and the advertising is inclusive, and I think even at interview level, make sure that you've got, I guess, a diverse representation, in the interview process, to be fair.
I appreciate you both sharing. I think also, as any organisation, show up where these individuals are and be consistent, be there and be honest and engaging. Now, look, as we move beyond that, I recently read a report where only 12% of CISOs actually believe that their security awareness training was working. So why do we keep forcing employees to click through 45-minute phishing videos, once a year? Are we just performing compliance fear to here, or is it something that we're just stuck in the rut with?
So I think for some companies it's a tick box exercise for cyber insurance. That's me being pessimistic. But I do think that when we think about training, you need to understand because there are different learning styles. Some people learn by doing, you're kinetic learners. Some people learn by visual. Some people learn by audio. With 45 minutes doing a click through or e-learning, people don't really get in the richness. Because if we look at the training, number one, when was the last time you updated your training? Because even if you look at phishing training, in the past you would say things like the attacker might have badly worded email, or you'd be able to find out. But with AI, perfectly written emails are are being written, so they don't work for today's age. Also, when we look at things like you know um, spoofing and other things, is actually letting people know what are the different scenarios in which this can take place. I'm a huge fan of role play, and also not only doing a role plays within different departments, also making the training specific to the department in which you're working on, so that they can understand, going back to that tactical knowledge in their day to day, what does this look like and how can I embed security in my day to day life. And that's essentially what you want. And I know it's a lot of work, especially when you work in organizations that might have very, very lean cybersecurity team, that you just don't have the time to actually be able to do efficient training because you're focusing on trying to make sure the house doesn't go on fire. So there are challenges to training that I'm aware of. I think that's why it's really good to look at micro learning tools that are out there that allows you to embed those training little by little so that people can see it in day-to-day actions. I don't know if I can mention organizations.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go ahead. I know you did some work with LinkedIn in the past with some micro training there. What were the lessons learned with that, for instance?
Yeah, so I would say, LinkedIn's a good place. I would also recommend Red Flags. They're really good with their micro learning. Meta compliance as well is another good training tool that I've seen being utilized as well. And even having things like I think Harmonic AI that I actually met at UK Cyber Week event. They're really good as well because what they do is they stop personal data from going into any Gen AI platform, which is extremely good, especially when you're worried about that data leakage within those platforms. So actually, it's by utilizing a mixture of tools that stops people from behaving badly, but also teaching people how they can do the right thing or how they can report. So I would say that with companies, organizations focus on that 45 minutes training, it's a mixture of a tick exercise, but also it's understanding that a lot of companies have very lean cybersecurity team. And I think that's the problem as well, that there's just not enough staff members within security because security is not seen as an income generating tool. It's seen as a thing that we just have to do, almost like legal teams as well.
Incredibly still the same mantra as well. And let's stay on that topic a little bit and maybe circle back to what we talked about before, which is the carrot and stick mentality. Companies love internal phishing simulations, sending these fake phishing emails, testing the staff, sometimes, penalizing people or just to shame people, do we actually think that tricking your own employees is in any way effective to building resilience, or is it just does it have a big impact on psychological safety? Does it encourage what we touched on earlier in the episode, to people to sort of hide these mistakes?
I think psychological safety is definitely an important point. I think it depends on how you do it. I mean, if somebody makes a mistake with phishing test and then you put their name on a board of these are the people who made mistakes to the whole organization, that's not really going to change anything. You're shaming the person. But if you are able to say, "Hey, I saw you made a mistake. This was these are kind of like the aftercare of that mistake, whether it's by them doing another training whether it's you highlighting what they specifically did wrong and what they should do next time, I think that's extremely helpful. But sometimes you do have staff members who don't really get security and don't want to do it. And you have to utilize a tactic of letting their manager know or their executive of that department know that, these are, the eggs within your team that are not really behaving how they should. So sometimes that's needed. I think you have to know the situation to know which tactic to use. You can't always use the same tactic all the time. But I think what's more important is letting people know the process of that they have to follow when things are done wrong. I think that's important. With the tricking element, I think it does work sometimes. I think one, you want to know in a case of an attack, because an attack, you're not going to know when it's going to happen. You can't predict it. It comes out of the blue. You need to understand if your organization is resilient enough to be able to withstand that attack. So yes, I do think it's important. But what you do with that information and with that data, with how you try to change the culture, I think is extremely important. I know for training that I've done, especially in my workplace, I created a digital twin. And I essentially said, between these two videos, which one is AI and which one is me? They were both AI. It was a trick question. But
Sneaky.
It was sneaky. But they were able to say, oh, no, this is AI and this. And then I was like, they're both AI. And everybody was like shocked. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, what, really? And I'm like, yes, that's how good AI has gotten. So you need to be very vigilant at all time, because if somebody sends you a video of our CEO telling you to do something and you can't tell the difference between a real video and AI, you're going to be in trouble. But that shock factor created a buzz with people talking, saying, oh my gosh, did you see what happened? Oh gosh, AI is so da. But that's the culture. You want that conversation to keep going. But again, it's how you utilize that shock factor. But you're not necessarily tricking them, but you want to highlight that don't let your guards down, because at any moment, what you see here, the stability you see, can be taken away by an attacker that just has found the right entry point. So I think that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, fair. Good answer. Let's talk a little bit more about burnout. We've talked about this a lot on previous episodes, especially cyber burnout. They go hand in hand. Employees, exhausted, workloads getting increasingly more difficult, less money, more expectation. So understandably, and again, this is something we're seeing more and more of, they're feeding that sensitive company data into, AI tools just to get through, just to survive, just to manage. Do blanket bans on AI, just drive this human behavior more and more underground? How do we secure a workforce that's outsourcing, out innovating, its own skills, its own IT?
Yeah, I think shadow AI is definitely an important
Problem.
It's definitely a problem. I think doing a blanket no AI, I don't think that works. I have an example, but it's not particularly appropriate. But you have seen, I think we see, for example, when certain things are banned, they move into the black market. Same way. Maybe this is my story as how I even got into cybersecurity. In school, certain websites were banned when I was in secondary school, and I would go to the internet to find ways to bypass to be able to go to certain websites, during secondary school. So, and that's just an example. If you stop people from utilizing AI, they're just going to do it without you knowing completely. I think what's important is you need to educate your staff. There needs to be kind of this knowledge gap of, this is AI. This is our structure, our stance on AI. I think a lot of organizations haven't even thought about what is your stance on AI. Yes, we allow AI, but you have to tell us the AI that you're utilizing. Another technique in which organizations do is they just block certain websites. You just can't go into certain websites. I know that some companies have blocked DeepSeek, for example. You can't go to DeepSeek. A third example is actually you creating a culture by doing things like, so I know for me, we created Ask Me Anything events where individuals can come and ask questions for the tech team and the cyber team about AI. What is AI? What is AI used for? What are the different types of AI out there? What are the existing Gen AI tools that we are aware of that are currently out there? What is the processes of registering the AI tool that you're using so we have it on record that this person is utilizing this tool? It's creating a conversation to make it easy that no, we're not banning you from using AI. We believe that AI used properly can increase innovation and increase efficiencies, but we need to know the AI that you're utilizing so we can protect you on those platforms. And that's the messaging that needs to be done for you to be able to have this information. Now, with that, I'm not naive to think that, everyone's going to tell us what AI they're using. Some people are just not going to still tell us. So that's completely fine. But I think you want to create a culture where you're getting 70% of those people who are utilizing the AI tool, that you have it on record. And just also highlighting that it's such a simpler process, because if they let us know or if anything happens, they are not, we're not necessarily going to penalize them on it. If, instead we're going to work with them to say, okay, this happened on this platform, this is how we're going to help you. So I think it's reframing the conversation around AI and kind of demystifying it to say it's not this big bad wolf or, Voldemort that no one really wants to talk about. It's actually something that we want to talk about openly because we feel like innovation can come out of that, but we have to work together. Security and technology is everyone's responsibility. I think that's the word that I'm looking for. But yeah, I think the blanket just saying no, it doesn't work. You're going to create a culture in which people are hiding things from you. And it's even worse in the long run if something goes back or if there is a data leakage. So you definitely want to create a culture where people are open enough to share with you what AI tools that they're using.
No, absolutely. Clearly a very, very important topic, and I dare say we'll be talking about a lot more over coming years.
Yeah, and so sort of further to that, I know we're rapidly moving from generative AI to agentic AI, a digital agent that can actually execute tasks on a user's behalf. But when employees delegate these critical workflows to these AI agents, who owns the culture of accountability if the agent's compromised? And are organizations really going to be, dealing with these systems well, integrating them, especially if we're in a phase at the moment that they're still not treating their human workforce as equals?
That's such a tricky question. Do I think that organizations are culturally ready to manage digital co-workers? No. I think some industries are further along the line. I think, for example, the likes of Deloitte and kind of consultancies, they're a little bit further down the line. But I don't think organizations have enough information at the moment. I feel like there is more information being gathered every day to make accurate decisions of how AI digital agents would be utilized. Same way, I think there was issues when it got rolled out on AI browsers. And now there are talks of actually, should we be having AI browsers or should we be having AI browsers talking with other AI browsers? And the conversation, the rabbit hole goes deeper and deeper. But I think right now it's quite premature for organizations to start utilizing AI agents, in my opinion. I feel like more information needs to be gathered, and you have to understand it. If you don't understand AI, and it's a buzzword for some industries, I would say definitely in the charity sector. I can't really speak too much for other sectors. I think once enough information has been gathered on how we can utilize this tool for efficiency, I think then we can graduate to the conversation of AI agents. Or is it that you only roll out AI agents to tech teams first, and then utilize that as a case study to then roll out to the organization? I do think it's something that if you are going to experiment with, definitely do on a phased approach rather than saying, okay, we're just going to make this thing and roll it out throughout the whole organization. But maybe I'm a bit pessimistic. I just don't think that they're at that stage.
And how does that make you feel in terms of organizations that are at that stage right now and that are perhaps using these technologies and they don't have the guardrails in place, not using it ethically, for instance?
I think that's the thing with regulations. I think there's going to be a lot of mistakes being made now, which will be great for case studies and lectures in the future of how things have gone wrong. I think most recently there was the whole police incident with ChatGPT having hallucinated data that affected a case. I think that the organizations that do understand AI and do utilize agentic AI, I think they're in the forefront. But because they're in the forefront, they also have the responsibility of modeling good behavior. And it goes back to my point. I don't think a lot of people have enough information to know what good behavior looks like at the moment, because I don't think there are sufficient regulations right now that are defining this is the appropriate use of it, this is the limit that you can go. So I think on the good side of the coin, a lot of innovation is happening, and those are kind of the defining factor of those who are going to get left behind during this wave in the next 10 years. But how it's being done ethically at the moment makes me worried. I don't think that we have enough regulations. And I don't think regulators have enough information as well. I think there's a black box with the conversation around agentic AI at the moment for everyone at all sides of the tables to make good decisions. So does it make me a bit worried? Yes. One is, which organizations are utilizing it? Is my data safe with the organization with the utilization of AI agents? But yeah, we'll see. I think it's one of those things that we kind of have to see it play out. And I think in more time we will have better knowledge. I think same with the internet. When it came, it was a buzzword, and everyone was kind of playing with the internet. And now people understand digital footprints and other things as a consequence of information that we've gathered. So I think I'm neutral at the moment, but also a bit fearful.
Yeah. Appreciate you sharing. We'll check back in with you on that at Q4, see how things have progressed. But look, we understand that you're going to be joining us at this coming Cyber Leadership Summit in London. When the doors are closed, the vendor pitches stop, and it's just the leaders in the room. What's one of the most uncomfortable conversations that you're urging leaders to have around culture?
I think it's understanding. I think right now one of the biggest issues is, or why I see a lot of organizations moving is, are the systems that we currently have, are they fit for the time that we're in at the moment? Whether it's legacy systems, the way we do training, the way we understand the threats that are out there, and we educate our teams on the threats and how they can navigate those threats. Do we have up-to-date information? And I think right now there is a rapid digital transformation I'm seeing in the roles that are coming out there. There's so many chief digital transformation officers at the moment. I think there has to be a cultural shift as to how fast we move with the information that we're getting, and in the speed in which AI and technology is moving, that we're able to make decent systems and architectures within our organizations to be able to withstand those threats that we're seeing. So I think culturally, there needs to be a massive shift. And I'm not sure if a lot of organizations are ready for that, because we can't do things for status quo, because the threat landscape has changed so much in the last 2 years. Do you have the right security culture? Do you have the right systems in place to be able to withstand that? And I think that's the biggest threat. And there are some conversations that are happening around that I'm super excited for within the summit. But I would say those are kind of conversations I'm looking to have.
Absolutely. And look, one of the things that we love about Cyber Leaders Summit is it is more of a peer-to-peer event. For leaders who may be a bit on the fence about attending events such as this in person, why do you think it's critical for these individuals to get out of the boardroom and get into the trenches, and have these conversations?
Because you need community. I think it goes back to the point that I mentioned. I know for a fact that a lot of CISOs are lonely, and I know that there also is a lot of moving parts, and sometimes it can kind of feel, especially when you are a leader, there's a lot of pressure on you. And sometimes actually going out to these events allows you to open your mind, want to know what are the new vendors or new tools that are out there. Also,
without
what
actually having to speak to the vendors.
yeah, just, and you can already see it on the list of the list before you even go. Who are the vendors? What do they do? But also, I think in the other side is actually having that peer to peer support. There are friends who I've made, 3 friends that I know that I've made from the last summit. And it's very good to kind of have a sounding board. Of course, you won't share sensitive information, but it's good to have a sounding board because you don't have all the answers. And sometimes actually saying, how are things done in the finance industry? How are things being done in the fashion industry? How are things done in the makeup industry? Allows you to open your mind to say, okay, that's quite innovative. Maybe I can try that here. Because again, like I said, if we are going to change the systems, you're going to need to understand how the system's being operated in different industries. And by going to events like this, opens your mind for that to be able to see, okay, what can I learn from them and what can they learn from me? I think it's more of a community effort. So I would say the peer-to-peer effort, great, but also seeing what tools are there. You may not be able to afford the tools, looking at the way budgets are right now for cybersecurity, but it's great for you to have an understanding of how some of the problems that you're thinking about are being challenged and being solved by the vendors that actually do showcase. I mentioned harmonic AI, which I saw from the last summit. And it was quite interesting that, yes, I've been thinking about shadow AI, actually just getting people to stop any sensitive information being shared. It's a brilliant idea, So I would say that these events allow you to open your mind. And I have been to a couple events like this. And I would say what I really like about the Cyber Leaders Summit is that it's there are different chances for you to, whether it's through the table where you have a facilitator to focus on certain topics that you're interested in, or if it's the kind of showcase where you have more panel discussions and more people, vendors kind of sharing how they're solving certain problems. It allows you to have a better commercial understanding of what's going on. And because things are moving rapidly, it's a great way for you to be able to kind of check in, pull yourself out of kind of the laser focus within your own organization and actually see on more of a bird's eye view how the industry is operating at the moment. So you can take that knowledge and then go back with that information into your organization. So that's probably what I would say to anyone who's on the fence.
Yeah, 100%.
And to female leaders that are out there, appreciate you converse with many of them, which myself and Jay are always raising awareness of opportunities such as Cyber Leadership Summit because it's an intimate gathering. So what tips, perhaps 3 pieces of advice would you give those that are preparing for these events to build confidence perhaps or to overcome imposter syndrome?
Oh, imposter syndrome is a big one. I think it's just to understand that it's a community thing. You're not the only expert, and there will be people who know more than you. That's just a factor of life. You're not going there as an expert. You're going there as someone who's part of a community. And it's a different mindset shift because when you're thinking about the expert, you have to prove yourself, you have to showcase your knowledge and skills. And that's not what this event is for. The event is a community event to be able to share knowledge and learn. So it's kind of changing that framework that you're not going here to prove yourself, you're going here to network. And the people are lovely. You can definitely have conversation with different people. The tips I'll say is to prepare is, having the right mindset before you go and just to be open. Don't have any expectations. Go very open-minded like a blank sheet because you're just there to soak in as much information as possible. The second thing is that, network, see who's showing up. As anyone talks about it on social media, look on LinkedIn, say, hey, I'm going to, that's a great way to make a connection even before you get to the event, if you're someone who's kind of scared to talk to people in person. And the third one I would say is to have a positive spirit. Have a positive spirit because what you give is what you receive. I'm a big believer of that. And if you have good energy and you're talking to people, people are willing to have conversations. I don't think there's anyone there that I've seen that said no to a conversation. So don't be afraid. And and a conversation can just be, hey, I work this place. What do you do? And you can even talk if you want to use as a frame point, especially for those who are shy and introverts. Just look at an example from the event and then bring it, especially when we have smaller tables where it's more of an intimate setting. It's a great way for you to pick up what someone had said and say, oh, I found that quite interesting. Can you tell me more about that? That's a reference point. That kind of allows you to kind of create conversations if you're feeling flustered as to how do I walk up to someone. There are many chances, whether it's kind of picking something from the big event or the small event, to be able to network with people.
And look, as we come to the back end of the episode, if any CEO or CISO is listening to this, wants to maybe stop the guessing game, just find out what their true security posture is looking like, over the next sort of day or so. What's the very first audit that, in your opinion, they would need to run regarding their organisation's daily rewarded behaviours?
Oh, so I think when you're thinking about culture, it's for you to define what do you mean by culture and which part of the culture do you want to get information on. There is no way to audit security culture because it encompasses different things. You can't just look at phishing and say, okay, that's my security culture. That doesn't really work. It's you defining what your security culture is and what do you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on, is your objective to look at, what people kind of like when there's an incident, how people react to that incident? Is security posture to you looking at not say phishing emails, because there are different ways in which you can do it. You could do phishing, you could do different kind of testers. But I think it's having an objective of what are you trying to find out about the culture of your organization, and then create an audit based on that. So if you noticed based on your data, and you can kind of make it data led, let's say data breaches has been focused on one particular department, for example, then you might decide to single out that department and do an audit on that department to see what is specifically wrong with that department. If it's the data is telling you more of people are not doing training, for example, security awareness training, you then might want to use a phishing test to now show, okay, X amount of people have failed the phishing test because X amount of people haven't done a training, and there's a correlation between both things. You can utilize that, but I think it's understanding what is the data telling you at the moment. If you do collect data, if you don't collect data, then you might want to start with what is your objective, and then focus on your objective on how you can get those data to understand your audit. Because it might also be a thing where you want to see with your security culture, what is your reporting culture like, for example. It's not necessarily a phishing email, but I know that sometimes you can utilize like impersonating the CEO and seeing if people act in a particular way or if they question the email, for example. So I think it's understanding what your objective is and then creating an audit based on that objective for you to be able to kind of collect data on that. And you can either make it data led, or you can start with kind of your first objective with what you want for your security culture.
That's some fascinating points. Really appreciate you sharing there, Stephanie. And can you tell us a bit more about yourself, the business, your core mission, and what the future holds?
So I think with Sadia, we currently have 8,000 members. We are pushing to have 10,000. Our goal is that by 2030, we want to have trained 100,000 women, which is a huge ambition. I know that right now we are revamping our board members. So our goal is really utilizing our courses and seeing from our courses, are they relevant to the job market? So we might change our certifications to be a bit more relatable to what the labor market is saying at the moment, as well as actually increasing the size. So right now we train about 80 women a year. We are moving that number to 150 women this year. And the goal is to keep moving that and also creating e-learning courses to then maximize the amount of reach of women that we can train in a year and also beyond that. So that's kind of our goal. We also have right now a cloud bootcamp applications, which is currently open for those who might be interested. We are training 15 women, and it's great because it's sponsored by Sage, and as well as looking at kind of cloud security, you also get to do a project that you'd be pitching to Sage, including Sage's CISO, and you'll be able to use that experience to kind of create your portfolio from that project as well. So it's a mixture of not only you learning, but also applying those skills in a real life situation as well for those who are interested.
And just on that a little bit more, what are the requirements for our listeners, audience, who can sort of reach out to you and enter that, for instance?
For sure. So you have to be over 18. We don't have any skills requirement. The goal is that a woman from anywhere can apply. You do have to reside in the UK for the specific boot camp. And because our organization is focused on Black and minority ethnic women, we do open applications to women from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. And in regards to when we say women, we allow anyone who identifies as a woman to apply to our programs.
That's brilliant. And to our audience, we'll leave some links to that in the show notes, of course.
Well, Stephanie, listen, thank you so much. It's been a really candid and unfiltered reality check for our listeners today. Where else can people reach out to you? Obviously LinkedIn, but is there anywhere else that our audience can find you or follow your work or hire a team? Any other areas and pointers you can give?
Oh, no, for sure. So I'm mostly on LinkedIn at the moment. I am thinking of creating a YouTube channel and a TikTok channel soon. But for those who are interested, Sadia does have a YouTube channel and also has an Instagram channel. On our YouTube channel, we have our old webinars for those who are interested in kind of learning the work that we've done. And anyone from this side of the coin can watch our videos. We have videos on mentoring because we're always looking for mentors. So if anyone wants to be a mentor, definitely reach out to me. We also have videos on how to be a SOC analyst or how to be a cybersecurity policy advisor. So the whole spectrum is there for those who are interested. But I'll say mostly look out for Sadia on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And for me personally, mostly right now on LinkedIn. But when I do have a YouTube channel and a TikTok channel, I'll let you guys know as well.
Steph, thank you very much for all your time today. It's been a great episode. You've broken down how sort of broken corporate systems are forcing good people to fail, and that systematic failure in terms of how we're managing our careers and hiring our teams. So look, stop fighting a broken system, everybody. Hit the description link, use the private access code EMPOWER, EMPOWER, to bypass the waitlist and join the platform. To you and all our community, from all of us here, stay secure.